I never thought planting flowers in my own front yard would cause so much drama, but then again, I didn't know what it meant to live under the sharp eyes of Karen from the HOA. She wasn't just any neighbor, she was the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood. The ruler of rules. The woman who believed she owned not just her house but everyone else's too. From the very first day I moved in, I noticed her. Karen was everywhere. If someone parked slightly crooked, she was there. If trash cans stayed out 10 minutes too long, she was there. And if a child drew chalk on the sidewalk, oh, you better believe she was there. Clipboard in hand, cell phone ready, Karen lived to control. But this time, she went too far. She fined me for flowers. Flowers. Bright, beautiful, harmless flowers that made my home look alive. At first, I laughed. I thought it was some kind of joke. Who finds someone for planting daisies and tulips? But when the letter arrived, stamped with the HOA's logo and signed with Karen's smug handwriting, the laughter turned into fire inside me. And let me tell you, that fire didn't die down. It only grew stronger. Karen loved control, but what she didn't know was that I had something she could never control: my determination. And the funny thing about determination is this: when you try to crush it, it multiplies. The fine wasn't just money. It was disrespect. It was a message saying, "You don't belong here unless you bow to me." And I wasn't about to bow. I paid the fine, but not in defeat. I paid it with a smile, because I already had a plan forming in my mind. A plan so sharp and poetic that even Shakespeare would clap. You see, Karen had a secret weakness. A place where she dropped her crown and acted like a normal person. That place was the flower shop down the street. Every weekend, she went there. Every holiday, she bought her arrangements there. It was her guilty pleasure. Her soft spot. And that's when the wild idea struck me. If Karen wanted to fine me for flowers, then I was going to own the flowers. All of them. Before I tell you how I pulled it off, let me take you back a little. I wasn't the type of person to cause trouble. I moved into this neighborhood with a dream of peace, laughter, and family dinners in the backyard. I loved gardening. Flowers weren't just decorations to me, they were therapy. They were my connection to nature, my way of calming down after long days. So, when Karen fined me, it felt like she wasn't just punishing me. She was stepping on my passion. On something I loved. And when people step on what you love, the fight becomes personal. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her smirk in my head. That smirk when she handed out fines, as if she had won some grand war. I knew I had to do something bigger than just fight back with words. That's when the flower shop idea became more than a thought. It became a mission. I started visiting the shop secretly, watching how it ran. The owner was an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson. Sweet, gentle, and tired. She had run that shop for decades, but now she was ready to retire. She needed someone to take over. And as fate would have it, that someone was me. I made her an offer. I told her I would keep the spirit of her shop alive. That I would protect the flowers she had nurtured for years. Her eyes lit up. She didn't care about the money as much as she cared about the legacy. She wanted the flowers to stay in good hands. And in that moment, the deal was sealed. I bought the flower shop. Now imagine the irony. Karen fined me for planting flowers, but every bouquet she bought, every arrangement she showed off at her parties, would now have to pass through my hands. The power shifted. The throne she sat on cracked. But I didn't reveal it right away. No. That would have been too easy. Revenge isn't about rushing. It's about timing. It's about letting the other person dig their own grave with arrogance, then showing them the shovel they used. So I waited. The first week I owned the shop, I stayed in the background. Karen walked in as usual, demanding perfect roses. I stood behind the counter, pretending to be a new helper. She didn't even look at me. Typical Karen. But inside, I smiled. Because every petal she touched, every stem she smelled, was mine. People say revenge is bitter, but I disagree. Sometimes, revenge is as sweet as a blooming rose. The next HOA meeting came. Karen strutted in with her usual confidence. She carried a fresh bouquet, bragging about how she always had the finest flowers in town. She looked around the room, waiting for applause. And that's when I stood up. Calm, collected, and maybe a little dramatic. "Beautiful flowers, Karen," I said. "Where did you get them?" She smirked. "At the shop I always use. They never disappoint." The room chuckled politely. And then I dropped the truth. "Well, thank you for supporting my business. I just bought that shop." The silence was priceless. Her face, even better. It went from red to pale to something that can't even be described in words. If looks could kill, I'd be buried under a garden by now. But the best part wasn't the shock. The best part was the shift. Suddenly, everyone saw that the Queen had no crown. That her power wasn't as solid as she made it seem. She fined me for flowers, yet she depended on me for them. The hypocrisy was undeniable. Neighbors started whispering. Some even laughed. And Karen, she was speechless. For once in her life, she had no rule to quote, no fine to issue, no clipboard to hide behind. I walked out of that meeting not just as a homeowner, but as the new ruler of irony. And let me tell you this, revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, it's about building something so strong, so untouchable, that your enemies can't help but trip over it. I didn't just get back at Karen. I created something beautiful. A business. A legacy. A garden that stretched beyond my yard into the hearts of everyone who loved flowers. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Karen wasn't done. She would try again. She always did. But now, I had the upper hand. I had the flowers. And no fine in the world could take that away. What happened when Karen tried to destroy me again? You won't believe how far she went, and how I turned her own tricks against her. Owning the flower shop felt like victory, but with Karen, victory never lasted long. She wasn't the type to back down. No, Karen was the type to come back stronger, meaner, and more desperate to prove she was still in charge. And I knew it was only a matter of time before she made her next move. The calm before her storm lasted just 2 weeks. 2 weeks of peace, where I watered my flowers without fear, waved at neighbors who suddenly looked at me with respect, and smiled every time Karen drove past my yard with her lips pressed tight like she had swallowed a lemon. But then, it happened. One morning, I opened my mailbox and there it was again. A white envelope. The same HOA stamp. The same handwriting that made my blood boil. Another fine. This time, the reason: excessive flower decorations causing neighborhood distraction. I laughed out loud. Distracting? Since when did roses become dangerous? Was a sunflower going to cause a traffic accident? The excuse was so ridiculous that even my dog tilted his head when I read it out loud. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't about flowers anymore. This was war. Karen couldn't stand that I had turned her punishment into power. She wanted me humiliated, broken, crawling back to her rules. But instead of crawling, I decided to climb. Higher. Stronger. Louder. This time, I didn't fight alone. My neighbors, who once stayed quiet out of fear, started speaking up. They were tired of Karen too. Tired of the endless rules. Tired of the fines. Tired of living like every little mistake was a crime. One by one, they came to me. "We're with you," they said. "We want change." And just like that, the flowers in my yard weren't just flowers anymore. They became a symbol. A rebellion. A bright, colorful flag saying, "We won't bow to you, Karen." The next HOA meeting wasn't like the others. This time, the room buzzed with energy. People weren't whispering. They were ready. Karen walked in, chin high, clipboard tight, bouquet of my shop's flowers in her hand like a weapon. She started reading off her usual list of complaints. Trash cans here, fences there, flowers everywhere. But when she called my name, I didn't sit quietly. I stood tall. And so did half the neighborhood. "Karen," I said, my voice steady, "you find me for flowers again. But these flowers aren't just mine anymore. They belong to everyone who's tired of living in fear. Look around. Do you see how many of us are done with this nonsense?" The room erupted. People clapped. Some even shouted, "Enough is enough." Karen's face froze. For the first time, she realized she wasn't fighting me alone. She was fighting all of us. Her power slipped like sand through her fingers. And she knew it. But she wasn't finished. Oh no. The very next day, she filed a complaint with the city. She claimed my flower shop was violating environmental codes. She wanted inspectors to shut me down. She wanted to kill the very thing that gave me strength. When I heard the news, my chest tightened. For a moment, fear clawed at me. What if she succeeded? What if my shop, my dream, was taken away? But then I remembered something. I wasn't the same person she found months ago. I wasn't weak. I wasn't alone. And I had something Karen would never have, the truth. I gathered every permit, every license, every document. I made sure everything was perfect. When the inspector came, I welcomed him with open arms, flowers in hand. He looked around, checked his list, and finally smiled. "Everything looks great," he said. "You're good to go." Karen's plan had failed. Again. Word spread fast. The neighbors cheered. Customers poured into my shop, not just to buy flowers, but to show support. Karen thought she could break me, but all she did was build me higher. And here's the sweetest part. Weeks later, Karen had to plan a huge event for her family. A wedding. She needed flowers. And where do you think she had to go? That's right. My shop. I'll never forget the look in her eyes when she walked in, forced to order from me. She tried to hide it, but I saw it. The bitterness. The defeat. The silent scream inside her chest. And I smiled as I arranged every petal, every rose, every lily. Because in that moment, I wasn't just selling flowers. I was selling victory. Karen thought she was the queen of control, but in the end, she became her own prisoner. She built a world of rules and fines, and that world collapsed under the weight of her own pride. Me. I learned something powerful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting. Sometimes, it's growing. Growing stronger, growing brighter, growing so much that your enemies can't ignore you. Flowers taught me that. They bloom no matter how many times they're cut down. And that's exactly what I did. I bloomed. Collision, final hook, and CTA. So, if you've ever dealt with a Karen in your life, remember this: don't fight them on their level. Build something they can't touch. Let your success be the bouquet they're forced to buy. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because there are more wild neighborhood battles coming your way, and trust me, you don't want to miss them.